We can have a dancing dog, but no clicker. That's technology for you. Perfect. Thank you very much. We're all here, I hope, because we all acknowledge that we can't sit around and do nothing and wait for something magical to happen. We have to design the future of our organizations. We have to be intentional about what we want our organizations to become and how we get our people to take us on that journey. One of the things I absolutely love about coming to Istanbul is the fact that the first language my book was translated into was Turkish. And I'm going to share some of the thinking that went into that book. And I'm also going to share some of the thinking and frameworks that I use with organizations around the world, with HR leaders and with CEOs and with boards, because I want today to be really practical for you. I want you to be able to take things away and have conversations in your organizations that really help you shift the needle. The first thing we have to acknowledge is, despite how important innovation is and despite how much we talk about innovation, there's still a huge gap that no one really acknowledges. Over 80% of senior executives around the world say that innovation is critical to the growth of their organizations. Yet we still have a statistic that shows us less than 10% of those same executives are happy with how their organization innovates, with their innovation performance. And the challenge with it is, it's not about technology, it's not about frameworks or tools, it's all about people. And that's why, in the age of AI, and the conversation about is AI replacing humans or is it AI plus humans? My belief is that we will shape the future of our organizations by figuring out the right balance of humans and AI. And when people are a core part of that conversation, it means you as HR leaders are a core part of that conversation, because you are here and in your organizations, and you're the ones that can shape the future of your organizations through the people inside your organizations. So, one of the things I like to use when I talk is analogies from nature. If any of you don't know what the ghost orchid is, it's widely considered one of, if not the most difficult orchids to grow on the planet. Even for the world's best orchid experts, it's incredibly difficult to grow. And the parallel with innovation inside our organizations is the same. Genuine innovation that really shifts our organizations forward is really, really difficult. And the conditions that innovation requires mirror the conditions that the ghost orchid requires. Low adaptability. The ghost orchid can't survive unless the conditions for growing that orchid are perfect. It can't survive without really strict requirements around light and the soil that it's planted in and the conditions and atmosphere and the atmosphere it's in. And it's really, really slow to grow. And innovation's the same. Innovation can't drive our organizations forward if you try and innovate inside the standard conditions that most organizations are made up in. Innovation requires different ingredients. It requires different conditions. And it requires us to be patient. Innovation fundamentally is a people-driven activity. And it requires us to embrace all of the things that we need people to do to contribute to driving innovation in our organizations. It requires us to change the way we lead our organizations, and it requires us to change the culture of our organizations. And as you know, as HR practitioners and leaders, that takes time. What I want to share with you today is some of the frameworks that will help you take your organization on this journey. If you want the slides, feel free to get in touch after. You can have every single slide that I'm going to share here today, because I want you to take this conversation back into your organization and share it with your managers and your leaders, and hopefully it will help you shape the future of your organizations. The first lesson I want to share with you is innovation is an outcome. Innovation is the end result of lots and lots of activity, of the right ingredients, the right culture, the right kind of leadership, the right frameworks, the right governance. At the end of lots and lots of all of those ingredients coming together, hopefully we drive genuine innovation in our organizations. And when we reframe that for our leadership teams, and when you guys go back into your organizations and help your leaders reframe the conversation, it changes how they look at what innovation requires and therefore what they need to do as leaders in order to drive innovation. In my experience, there are 3 things that go wrong in organizations that lead to that statistic of over 80% of leaders acknowledging that innovation is critical, but less than 10% being satisfied with those results. In most organizations, innovation will fail because of one of 3 reasons. The first thing is innovation is isolated, that the business has positioned innovation as in a team or a department or within a certain function. We need to democratize the pursuit of innovation across our organizations. The second thing is that leadership teams are typically misaligned with what innovation requires in their organizations. And the third one, which is really important because every single one of you in this room today is able to influence all of these, but most importantly, the third one, is that the organizational culture doesn't allow innovation to thrive on a day-to-day basis. And that cultural condition is exactly why we wrote the book a few years ago. The core thing, and you'll hear lots of this over the next few days of today and tomorrow, one of the core things, and if you haven't seen the research from Google a few years ago, Project Aristotle was their research program that they ran to try and figure out why high-performing teams were high-performing. And the number one factor, that the culmination of all of that research, was that psychological safety is the core ingredient that drives high-performing teams. And it's the core ingredient that helps and will help you drive innovation in your organization. So think about how you can enable that and how you can drive psychological safety across your organizations. And I've got a little framework in a minute that I'm going to share, because psychological safety across an organization means very, very different things to different people. All of the work that I do with leadership teams around the world has identified 3 core things that innovation requires. As we've just said, the first one is psychological safety. The psychology behind why people think. Are they safe to think? Is it safe for them to take risk? Is it safe for them to challenge the status quo? Is it safe for them to voice opinion and voice ideas? How you drive and build the right level of psychological safety in your organizations is absolutely critical. The second thing that innovation needs is physical resources. We need clear strategy and guidance on what innovation is inside our organizations, a clear definition on what our organization says innovation is. We need frameworks, we need tools, we need budget. A dirty word, right? How do we finance and how do we fund activity? But we need budget, we need resources, we need governance. We need things in place to manage the pursuit of innovation. Without that, we get chaos. And the final thing is mindset and skills. We have to teach our people new skills, different ways of thinking, different ways of collaborating, different ways of coming up with ideas. We can't get innovation unless we design our organizations so that they're purposely built to build and drive innovation as an outcome. In most organizations, I know many of you will have much more complex organizational structures. But for the purposes of this conversation, let's split your organizations into 3 levels. The senior team, so senior leaders, executives, the board, the CEO, and then a middle layer. Let's call them the middle managers, the influencers, the business unit heads, team leaders. And then the third layer, the rest of our employees, non-managerial employees. If you split your organizations down, it's oversimplified, but if you split your organizations down into those 3 layers, what you have to figure out as HR leaders is how do you enable each layer of your organization to do what each layer requires in order to drive innovation. The framework that I've used around the world is called Own, Drive, Contribute. Create your version of it, but what I encourage you to do is to really figure out what each layer of your organization needs and needs to do in order to collectively drive innovation. The first thing for me is leadership and leaders should own the innovation agenda. They should own the strategy. They should put everything in place that innovation requires. The most important layer for me is then that next one. I think middle managers, your middle layer, the middle of your organizations, are the most critical layer when it comes to innovation. And certainly when it comes to building a culture of innovation on a day-to-day basis. They're what I call corporately bilingual. They have relationships upwards, and they also have relationships and they influence down the organization. They're the layer most under pressure to deliver day-to-day operation and day-to-day performance, but they're also the layer most under pressure, typically by leadership teams, to drive innovation, to be creative, to solve problems, to come up with new ideas. So as HR leaders, think about how you can really support that middle layer to bring innovation alive on a day-to-day basis. And then the third layer is everyone else in our organization, the non-managerial employee. There's a false narrative that's been around the world for many, many years. Innovation is everyone's job. I think as HR leaders, we know that that's not true. It can't be true. Every employee in our organization can't possibly be an innovator. Imagine doing your annual appraisal of every employee in your organization, and one of the questions on that annual appraisal is, demonstrate how you've innovated this year. Most of our employees would fail that question. But what we can do is reframe the language as HR leaders and ask those same employees not whether they've innovated this year, but how have they contributed to the innovation agenda in our organizations. It's a very, very different question, but it makes the pursuit of innovation something that everyone can get involved in. So, how do executives, how do senior leaders own the innovation agenda? Well, they have to set vision and direction, right? They set corporate strategy, they talk about where the organization's going, what the plan is for the next several years, what markets you're going to move into, what the vision for what the organization is going to become. And they have to embed innovation into that conversation. Innovation can't be something that's just added on to corporate strategy. It needs to be a fundamental component of how leaders communicate the future of the organization. And when they do that, that means they have to visibly commit to building and shaping the right culture, they have to own that innovation agenda. And they have to visibly be seen to be doing everything that innovation requires. And yes, they have to put governance and structure and budget and frameworks and things in place. And most importantly, they have to model the right behavior. You'll all know as HR leaders that actions have to match words. And when leaders talk about the need for driving innovation in organizations, but those words aren't matched with actions, we know the effect that it has on our employees. That second layer, the management layer, what I call the drive layer. How do you as HR leaders enable those middle managers to bring innovation alive on a day-to-day basis, to shape conversation, to shape behavior, to shape habits, and drive activity that ultimately will create innovative new solutions for your organization? The first thing is you have to make sure as HR leaders that your middle layer trusts your senior leadership layer. If any of you have followed the Edelman Trust Barometer every year, a global report about the state of trust around the world, but corporately as well. We know that trust is a significant issue at the moment. Look at this statistic. 67% of employees say they don't believe that their CEO really understands them. That's an incredible statistic when we're trying to build organizations that drive growth and where we empower people and where we want creativity and innovation. So I'd encourage you all as HR practitioners and as HR leaders to figure out how you can help solve that challenge in your organizations. We've heard psychological safety is a core issue, and all of the research from McKinsey, and you'll have seen work from amazing people like Amy Edmondson, 38% of organizations are more likely to report successful outcomes if they engage middle managers effectively. That's a huge statistic. These are huge jumps in performance if you guys can help your organizations get them right. And the middle of the organization needs real autonomy. It needs the power and the ability on a day-to-day basis to make decisions that will help drive innovation. And organizations that do that, that build really high, strong trust cultures, typically are 2.1 times faster at innovating. That's 2.1 times faster at getting new products to market or solving problems or competing with competitors. And in the world that we live in today, being twice as fast as a competitor could mean the difference between our organizations thriving or not. And then the final layer, the rest of our employees. How do we enable them to genuinely contribute on a day-to-day basis to that innovation agenda? When we really supercharge our employees, all of the statistics and all of the data shows us 59% higher or lower turnover in our organizations. 21% higher profitability when organizations really empower their employees. Again, these are huge leaps forward for our organizations. Huge leaps forward in performance, in innovation, in creativity, in competitive advantage. And you guys are at the forefront of being able to make these shifts by figuring out how you embed innovation as a core capability across your organizations. But I want to offer a provocation today, because I think language in organizations is really, really important. And how we communicate as leaders, as CEOs, and how you communicate as HR leaders. This has really bugged me for many, many years. why do we continue to call ourselves the Human Resources Department? Resources are consumed. Human beings create. We collaborate. We're creative. We shape the future. Our people aren't resources to be managed, to be deployed, to be optimized. I think how you position and brand yourself is incredibly important. I think there's an argument for reframing HR to HB, the Human Beings Department. You as practitioners leveraging the power of human beings in the age of AI. The people in your organization are the creative force that will shape the future of your organizations, not AI. AI will help you automate and be more efficient and all of the things we know about it, but AI can't be creative yet. AI can't collaborate with colleagues yet. AI doesn't understand empathy from one person to another or from between you and your customers. Human beings do that in our organizations, and every single one of you is at the forefront of leveraging the power of your people. You're all at the forefront of unleashing the power of humans inside your organizations in the age of AI. And there's one more provocation. Many of the leaders that I work with around the world use a variation of the term VUCA, volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous. And they use a variation of that for how they see the world, given that they have to lead their organizations in a time of volatility and uncertainty and complexity. I think you guys have the ability to help your leaders reshape how they see themselves as well. And I'd like to offer an example of how I think leaders should see the world. My challenge to you is how can you help your leaders shift from seeing the world as volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous to a different version of VUCA, which is visionary, unbounded, curious, and authentic. And if you can shift their mindset so that that's how they see themselves, they will undoubtedly help you shift your organizations to an organization that can genuinely drive innovation-led growth. And that's how you're going to help your leaders win what I call the conditions game. Thank you very much.
Stay here. Let's get it. So, Cris, that was wonderful. Do you give us all permission to update our LinkedIns to Chief Human Beings Officers?
Absolutely.
Okay, good. There we go. We have new status for everyone. You talked about innovation being an outcome and a process, and you gave us that structure with the conditions game. What's one thing that we can do in our leadership roles to kickstart that process, start to get that behavior change happening? Because it feels like a lot, right?
Yeah.
So what's one or two things we can do to start?
So the first thing is, from a leadership point of view, figure out how you properly define innovation in your organizations. Be really clear about exactly what innovation is, what it requires, and why the organization wants to drive innovation. Because one of the core challenge with innovation is, if we go into any of your organizations and we ask a dozen people what they think innovation is, we're likely to get a dozen different answers. And what we can't do is build culture and behavior and performance around a word that has multiple different definitions across our organization. So the first thing is, be really clear on what innovation means to your organization.
Be clear. Your book is in Turkish?
Yes, yep.
How can we get hold of this?
Do you know what? I honestly don't know. I'm presuming you can buy it in bookshops. I have a few copies in Turkish. I've got English copies with me. I haven't got loads, but I've got a few. I honestly don't know. I presume Turkish bookstores.
Chris's book is available in Turkish. That's what we need to know.
Yeah.
Thank you very much, Cris Beswick. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you. Thanks, Cris.